All right, everybody, welcome back. We're on to part C of our chapter 11 here. And part C simply asks you to solve equations with logs. In this section, we're not actually going to use anything with logarithms other than to recognize that this is not going to be as complicated as we ask for. Because when we look at these, you can see I've got two logs on either side of the equation. But in all of them, they have the same base. So all of those have the exact same base. And it turns out that when logs have the same base, we can simply, well, it's probably easiest to think about, we can cancel those out. And we can rewrite this in one of two different ways. You can remember, let's look at 62, that this is 20 something like that. That those are really exponents, and we can write it like that, where they would kind of cancel out. Or rather than even do that, let's just go ahead and we're going to write it like that. And we're going to cancel out the bases that are the same. And remember that regardless of how I'm doing this, either if it's exponential or log forms, that if these are the same base, we can simply cancel them out and write my equation. So there's my equations all written out. Now from here, we're going to just solve a linear equation like we've been doing all year, really. I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to add 4. And then divide by 5. Like so. In this one, we're going to solve add 2a, add 2, divide by the -1. In this one, probably easiest to add 2r to both sides. And then divide. And get 1/3. And then last, just add 4k to both sides. And I'm going to get -8. And here's why we want to be able to solve equations, because that's all we're going to do here. It's literally, can you solve this equation? Now, it turns out that as you go through, we're not going to worry about anything other than same bases here. So what we'll come back to later on is, can you solve these when they're not the same base? And then there's a whole lot of extra work involved to this. For right now, we're just trying to get over the complicated factor and be able to write this out. And realize that there's not a whole lot going on here. And there's my solution. What I am going to have you do in this is I am going to give you, once we get here to number 85, actually it starts at 80. I am going to make you solve some harder equations. You'll notice here, this is a quadratic equation because I have a squared. So for this, we have to go back to all of our work back. It really started with chapter 7, I believe, where you had to solve quadratics. And to solve quadratics, you had to set it equal to 0. And this should have been a plus 2a. And then you had to solve this either by taking square roots of both sides. That wouldn't work because b is not 0 here. Factoring, which we could try, or quadratic formula. It's going to be easiest in this case to solve by quadratic or by factoring because this does factor pretty easily. In fact, I'm not going to give you anything here that doesn't factor because these all have solutions. They all have rational solutions. So these can all be solved by factoring. And so in order to factor, I have to figure out two numbers of 48 that added up to 2, and 6 and 8 will do it. So there's my solutions. So again, it's not all going to be simple linear equations. In 86, there's my equation as I eliminate the logs. I recognize immediately that it's quadratic because I have a variable squared. So I'm going to set this equal to 0. Like so. And now again, I'm going to figure out factors of 42 that add up to 13. Both of these gave me a equals 1, or a equals 1 as my solution, or sorry, both of these had a lead coefficient of 1, so it's much easier to factor. And I used x's instead of m's there, that's okay. And there's my solutions. So we started off, especially on these, not to make any of the factoring too complicated for you. In fact, most of the factoring should be lead coefficients of 1 as well. This is simply, a review of factoring, a review of quadratics, and we're using that in order to solve some equations here as well. So go ahead. Your job is to finish solving all of these. Make sure you can solve both quadratic and linear equations at this point. And when you're ready and finish this and checked your work, we'll take a quiz on this at some point. Good luck.